This morning we are discussing the first miracle that Jesus did, beginning of his ministry. It's taken from the second chapter of John. But to give us a little start, let's read a little bit in the first chapter of John, starting in the 43rd verse. The day following, Jesus would go forth into Galilee, and findeth Philip, and saith unto him, Follow me. Now Philip was of Bethsaida, is a fishing town, and of the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there be any good thing come out of Nazareth? And Philip saith unto him, Come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered, and said unto him, Behold, before that Philip called thee, when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter shall you see the heavens open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. All right. What we're having here is Jesus is beginning his ministry. In the first chapter of John, we have the baptism of John the Baptist. Now I'm confused. We have the baptism of Jesus, and we have the transitioning from Jesus in his growing up years to becoming a minister and to begin his ministry. So he's baptized here, and then there's this reference here to Philip and Nathanael, and I found that very fascinating. I don't understand what Jesus seeing Philip under a fig tree had to do with the price eggs in China, but that's my inability to understand that. So there's significance in there, but I just can't find it. Anyway, it's interesting to me that Philip and Nathanael were students of the scriptures and was understanding. Philip understood that Jesus was the Messiah, which was quite a leap in faith there. Now, it's also interesting to me that when Philip referred to Jesus, he said he was Jesus of Nazareth. Where was Jesus born? So he should have said Jesus of Bethlehem. And he said also that, what did he say? He was the son of Joseph. Who was he a son of? Mary, the Son of God. Okay? So the good news is they didn't have their heads fastened on right intellectually, but they had their hearts right, and God was ministering to them in faith, and they were doing as they should. And accordingly, Jesus rewarded them by talking to them. All right, now we move on to the first miracle. And the third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, and both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. Years ago, I taught this lesson back underneath that balcony, and it was a bunch of young kids, high school kids. I don't know if there are any college kids in there. And so I made the statement that obviously Jesus was in agreement with marriage because he was there. And one of the people in the class, and I won't mention Aaron Moyer's name specifically, but he said, so you say that Jesus believed in marriage because he was there. He also talked to prostitutes. What do you got to say about that? So I stated it wrong, and I had to be more careful. I have not forgot my chastisement from Aaron. All right. But he was listening anyway. All right. So here we have a marriage feast and going on, and it appears that Mary was there in some fashion. Depending on who you talk to and who you read after on why Mary was there, some people believe that it was John, the disciple, that was the one that was being married. And as a consequence, Mary would be of relation to them. And so she would be there as a result of that. And that is also why Jesus and the disciples were there. Only a few disciples at this point in time had been selected by Jesus. So Mary has a problem. Mary comes to Jesus and she talks to him, and she said, they're running out of wine. And Jesus said, woman, why are you talking to me? And so you read the different writers after that, and it's interesting. They want to make sure that you understand that when he used the word woman, he wasn't talking in a degrading manner. He was talking in a manner that was positive toward Mary. And so Jesus says, it's not my time. Meaning it wasn't the time for his ministry in which miracles to be done. Jesus didn't do miracles to be seen of men. He did miracles for the benefit of spiritual help to people and to help them to understand. And so he's telling Mary, it's not time for me to do that. Well, you do a little reading and a little understanding, and it sounds like that what really was taking place is Mary says they're getting low on wine, and when they're out, kind of want you to do something about it. And so then the writers take Mary to task and said, what right does she have to be able to tell him what to do in his ministry, et cetera, et cetera. Mary ended up the discussion by saying this, whatever he says, do it. And it sounds to me like she turned on her foot and walked away and left it to Jesus. Now, it doesn't tell you that immediately he told them to go fill the water pots. So I am guessing there's a lapse in time here. And then he says, he looks at the water pots that are there. How big were they? 20 to 30 gallons, okay. How many of them were there? 6 of them. So there would be a lot of water. And then a little phrase intrigues me. It says the servants filled them how full? Filled them to the brim. Now that was a curious thought to me when Jesus says fill the water pot. Well, being a Greek student, where's Eli? Being a Greek student that I am, I went and looked up what the meaning was when Jesus said fill. And it meant to fill to the full. Okay, that word that was used means fill to the full. So the servants went out. They filled the water pots as full as they could get them, clear up to the brim. And they brought them back in and they set them down. What was the purpose of the water pots previously? Ceremonial, wash the guests that came in. So they would be ceremonial clean, okay? And this is one of the things that one of the writers said is that you'll notice as John begins to develop his gospel, what he does is he spends a little time on explaining what the miracle is, and then a great deal of time on the debate and the discussion that relates to the miracle subsequent to that. Also, he says what John is trying to do is to show that the miracles of Jesus was something that only the Messiah could do. And it was a demonstration that Jesus was truly the Messiah. And if you didn't have brains enough to be a student of the scriptures and stuff, it should have been enough for you to understand that Jesus was more than just a man, that he was truly the Messiah. All right. Also, John is developing a contrast between the old ways of faith versus the new ways of faith, the old ways of following the law versus the fulfillment or the trust in Jesus Christ, faith in Jesus. All right. So there we go. So then period of time elapsed, and Jesus said to the servants, take some of this dip out and take it to the master of the feast. Okay? And so they did. Took it to the master of the feast, and what'd the master say? He says, this is good stuff. And then he took this bridegroom aside and he said to him, usually what happens at these feasts is that the bring out the best wines first, and then when people are well drunk, well, I looked the word well drunk up too, see what that means. And it says nearly intoxicated. Okay. Now we get to the fun part of the Sunday school lesson. When did the water become wine? Did Jesus pray over it? They're talking just as much for you as they did for me. Or the other way around, anyway.
We don't know.
That's right.
We don't know.
Oh, man.
Neither does anybody else. People have ideas.
Yeah?
One was that the water did not become wine until it was poured out.
Okay. Some people believe that the water became wine once it was taken out of the stone jars. Think about that a little bit. If you remember correctly, if you remember back when the feeding of the 10,000 or the 5,000, where did the miracle take place? The miracle took place when Jesus prayed and he gave to the disciples, and then they distributed. So the miracle was at the hands of the disciples. So it's possible it could have been when it was dipped out. All right. Some people believe that it was turned immediately into wine. All right. Was the wine alcoholic? We might as well just get right down to the tough part of it.
Yeah, wine is alcoholic.
Wine is alcoholic.
It talks about people getting drunk in the.
What?
It talks about people getting drunk in the verses.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest, Logan, that when the master said that when people are pretty well drunk, that they weren't referring to that wedding, they were referring to weddings in general. That and the normal way of the course of events took place during the feast.
They already drank all the other wine that they had.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah, they were really thirsty.
Yeah. What was wine like in those days?
Very strong.
Very strong? Wrong answer.
But they diluted it when they served it. They did dilute it when they served it.
They would water the wine down significantly. Sandy bought me some stuff that I can squirt into my glass of water and it becomes a flavored water. No alcohol before you go there. But anyway, it just tastes like a watered down weak drink and it's terrible. But if you put about 4 or 5 squirts in it, now you're getting somewhere and it's good. All right. Wine back in those days was watered down in order to extend its usefulness, okay? And so it was an extremely weak wine as compared to what the manufactured wines are of today. In other words, there was no distilling of it or whatever to enhance the wine. I'm a master at wine subject, so if there's anything foul tasting, it is wine. When I taught school in Birmingham, Michigan, there was one of the football coaches that I coached with was an Italian, and we had a party one night, and he had some good wine. Well, I was curious to know what this good wine tasted like, so he gave me some. Oh, wasn't fit to give to hogs. All right.
Could have been just grape juice, because that's what, some people like grape juice turned to wine.
Oh, what a thought. This is a democratic group. How many people believe it was grape juice that Jesus created?
You gotta get grape juice first to get wine.
When Jesus is creating, he can create grape juice just as good as he can create wine, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, right?
Well, I think they called it wine when they did it to begin with. I think that was their word they used. And then as it kept sitting around, it would ferment more because they had no way of refrigeration.
Okay.
And so they had to keep diluting it because it got stronger and stronger. I don't know. Maybe that was their purpose.
How many of you think that it was alcoholic wine that Jesus created? How many don't care? I was talking to one of our friends about it, and she said, well, what difference does it make? Well, I'm sorry. I said, I was just trying to understand a little bit. I do not think Jesus created alcoholic wine. This is John's prejudice or position, whatever you want to say. You remember the story of Noah. Noah built a little boat. Hopefully we're going to get to see it this summer with somebody. And he got on that boat, and when he got off of the boat, he offered a sacrifice. He was a righteous man. He offered a sacrifice, and God said, I'm going to bring my rainbow out here to demonstrate that this will never happen again. Okay? And you read the next chapter, I think it is, and what happens to Noah? He's drinking wine, and what happens to him? He becomes intoxicated, and he's lying there in a exposed manner. And then one of the grandsons comes in and finds that situation, and there's allusions to abuse or whatever that might have taken place in that particular case. But Noah curses him and blesses the Shem and Japheth for covering him up and helping him. It appears to me that during the time of the flood, something changed in the way of the created universe that caused fermentation to take place at a faster rate or begin at all. And I tend to say begin at all in my thinking. So I think old Noah was drinking the process of his vineyard that he had farmed and was working out, and what he had previously was able to drink in abundance. He couldn't do that anymore, and he became drunk. Now let's go back to our wedding feast. Here we are, some 3,000 years later from the creation of from the time of the flood, and we have Jesus creating wine I think the wine that he created was of the utmost best quality of wine, whatever that is, and however it tastes, but it was non-alcoholic. I cannot in my own mind think that Jesus would create a product that would cause men to lose their abilities to think clearly and to not be in a profligate manner. Okay?
But if they didn't drink it in excess, they would still have clarity, though.
That's right.
If you have a glass of wine, you're still coherent. You know, it doesn't mess with your mind. It's when you abuse it or have excess.
Well, let's ask the next question that follows up there. Is Jesus against drinking wine?
I didn't think so.
Alcoholic wine.
That's a good qualification. She said alcoholic wine. That's what I meant to ask and didn't. Is Jesus opposed to drinking alcoholic wine?
No.
I think it's in Timothy. I can't find it right now. Might need to help me out. But I think Paul told Timothy to drink a little wine for his stomach's sake.
Okay. All right.
And it said little.
Interesting. Good qualification. And I think you are correct. It was in Timothy. Drink a little wine for your stomach's sake. And we believe that these words were authorized by God to be written and to be used in the churches, and we trust them, and that's what we based our doctrine and our thinking upon. So yes, we are in agreement with that. And so as a consequence, I would say that Jesus was not opposed to drinking wine. Why did the people of those cultures drink wine in the first place?
They didn't have safe water.
Probably safe water didn't exist, and it was called one way of handling things. And if they water the wine down a little bit, they could extend the use of this antiseptic drink so that they could drink and be nourished. All right. What else do I want to say? When they filled the water pots with wine, 20 to 30 gallons each, that would end up being 120 to 180 gallons of water or wine that we're talking about. So what Jesus was doing was he was taking a need that was in existence and he was administering to that need in abundance. Okay? And that's what we find that Jesus does when he does a miracle. He is doing a miracle or performing a miracle so that something can be fulfilled, all right? In this case, the fulfillment of a social need. Now, one of the writers wrote to the effect is that when Mary came to Jesus, she was concerned about a social need for that wedding feast. Jesus is concerned about the concerns of your life and my life that maybe is no big deal to anybody else, but he is concerned about those. And so we need to not only be charitable to those who have social needs of whatever kind they are. In addition to that, we need to learn how to ask efficiently and expressly and specifically, that's the word I'm looking for, specifically to meet the need that is there, okay, and the need that you have. All right. They took it to the master of the feast and they gave him to drink, and the master said, okay, this is really good stuff. One of the phrases that I found interesting in there was, he took it to the master of the feast didn't know that what this water was that had been converted into wine, but the servants knew. So John got his computer out and said, what's a servant? It was one of those menial people that was doing the menial task of the wedding and for taking care of the people, but they who were of the menial side of things knew what was going on in our lives. It don't matter how important you are or I think I am. There are somebody of lower status, etc., that knows more than I do about some things. And so we need to keep that in mind. And I think the reason they knew was to give further documentation and further evidence that this was truly a miracle when the news started to get out that a miracle had been done at the wedding. All right. The new wine was better than the old, and when was the water? We talked about that. What was the purpose of the miracles?
To help people have a stronger faith, that they believed it came from Jesus, so it's also try to strengthen their faith.
And what people in particular are we talking about?
Say the Jewish people? No?
More particular than that,
Jesus' disciples.
the disciples, okay? The purpose of the miracle was to demonstrate that Jesus was the Messiah, but it was also to help the disciples to understand that he was the Messiah. Philip understood he was the Messiah, and so did Nathanael, but they were only 2 of the 12, okay? And so of the disciples that had been chosen up to that point, they believed that Jesus was truly the Messiah. All right? Comments, questions, irritations, and aggravations?
What about wine and the Easter story?
What about what?
We just had communion.
Yeah?
Wine.
Yes? What about it? I don't know where you're headed.
Have a little cup. I don't know.
Yeah.
Is that alcoholic that they had to buy
Pastor, did we have alcohol in our juice this morning?
No, because I had some.
Not at all.
Not at all. Well, does that make it not true communion then?
That represents what is it? What we had? What does that represent?
Blood.
It represents the blood of Christ shed for you and I.
And from the Last Supper, they had bread and wine.
Yeah?
But again,
Which
we don't
represented
know
the
how
blood.
that wine is described. Wine could be just their generic word for grape juice.
If you're a teetotaler, okay, then you will fight to the death that the wine that Jesus used was not alcoholic. You will fight to the death that the wine that was used at the Last Supper was non-alcoholic. It was called a new wine. In other words, it was grape juice. Okay? I'm trying to bail you out here, and you're not helping me. All right. So, is it significant what the wine is or the liquid is? I would say no. And there are different, I think there are some churches that do use a true wine, I think. And other comments or questions?
But like this morning, like I said, this morning, we just had a little.
Yeah? Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether it was pure or watered down, like or grape juice, like the quarterly speaks about. It doesn't really matter. It's the reason we take it.
Yeah. It was before COVID, so. Oh.
What was the significance of Jesus saying it's not my time? And then he performed the miracle anyway. And how did she know that he could do it? Because was this more or less the first miracle?
It was the first.
So I guess she knew that he would be able to do something like that.
What did Mary know about Jesus? She knew about his birth, okay, because it wasn't a regular birth, okay? And you remember the wise men came and they talked about, the shepherds came, and what did Mary do? She pondered in her heart those things. And so he's 12 years old. They take him to the feast, the yearly feast, and they head back home, and Jesus doesn't go with them. All right, and they go back and they find Jesus, and where was he? He was in the temple discussing at a doctoral level the things of eternal values. And Mary noted that. So here's Mary now watching this young man grow to about 30 years of age and knows that he has more capabilities than just your average Joe or Sally or Sam, okay? And so I think that Mary knew that he had capabilities of being able to help this situation in some fashion. And I think it is evidence of her faith in her son. Okay? Do I think that Mary understood the totality of what Jesus' ministry and mission was? No, I don't think so. But I think Mary was right in there in understanding. You ask another question, and I can't remember what it was.
He said it wasn't his time.
Oh, it wasn't his time.
The
The reason I think he said that is Jesus did not perform miracles for showmanship. Okay? He performed them for the good of mankind to help them spiritually get to heaven. That was his purpose. And I think there's a gap of time in there that isn't expressed in the gospel, so that she talked to him, and I think she said to him, they're running out of wine, and he goes through this, well, it's not my time yet. But when they were out of wine, I think it became his time. So that's what I think he was referencing. Other questions or comments?
Isn't it appropriate that he does this miracle at a wedding feast? It makes me think of the wedding feast that we're all invited to someday, and Jesus is the new wine, and we're gonna be seeing him face to face. I like that picture of the wedding feast table that maybe somebody you've seen, and there's a head chair, and then that table just goes on forever and ever.
My problem is, there's 120 to 180 gallons. How many people came there? If there 120 people came, they had a gallon of wine to drink. I can't even drink a gallon of water.
Well, the writer that would follow that would say that Jesus provided an abundance for not only the feast, but for thereafter for
So they
quite some
stayed
time.
More than one day?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
So a week,
okay,
generally a week.
okay.
So I'm guessing we're midway through. If they're midway through and they ran out of wine, it would be a total embarrassment to the wedding people putting on the wedding. All right. Other comments or questions? You want to say something?
Well, I mean, all the scripture talks about wine as being fermented. Wineskins, swelling. I mean, it never talks about anything that's non-fermented wine. Okay.
Okay.
Well, just like people aren't supposed to eat too much food. You know what I mean? I mean, there has to be some kind of moderation. You know what I mean? To whatever you do. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean,
So where are you headed?
well, all I'm saying is that in my mind, it probably was fermented wine, you know what I mean? But, I mean, when he talks about the Last Supper, you know what I mean? He's talking about sharing a cup, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not talking about sharing 30 gallons, you know what I mean?
Right.
The Last Supper, you know, I mean, you just,
Share a little bit.
yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's not. I mean, and it was completely customary. You know what I mean in their time. You know what I mean. And as far as in Noah's case, that wine had to be around for a while because you know he had packing to do before that boat. You know what I mean. And probably didn't make that wine on the trip. You know what I mean. So I mean, it was pretty juiced up by the time he got there, and he was pretty happy. You know what I mean. That he went dry ground. I guess. I mean, I don't. I think there's, you know, in a celebration standpoint, people can overdo things, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, you know, when you have a problem with it, you just need to not do it at all. You know what I mean? And that's where it goes. You know, some people don't have problems with it. Some people do. So you just you can't go without food. You know, if you have a problem with it, you just can't. No more. That's it.
Well, some of us probably should stop a little bit. Yeah.
But anyways.
My purpose in bringing up alternate views is for you to expand that it may be more than just a simplistic answer or a look at the scripture, okay? So I'm trying to get you to think and to think about other things as well. And it does say in the scriptures that wine will make you happy, okay? But it also says don't be drinking the dregs, which says there are some of that stuff that's so powerful and bad that, and when it refers to the dregs, it's usually referring to damnation and a curse when it gets into that category too. So, if you are a teetotaler, you need to be charitable in your thinking about wine and the alcoholic end of it. If you are not a teetotaler, you need to have charity toward those who feel like they need to abstain to honor their God and Savior. Okay? And yes, it is reasonable that this first miracle would be connected to a wedding because the wedding is a metaphor that is used throughout Scripture to indicate the kingdom of God. Going once, going twice. Have a good week. And come back next Sunday.